Hello, everyone. Dr. Alex Schloe here with another episode of the Row Room Assisted Living Podcast. We want to provide you with as much value as possible. So for this episode, we decided to share a call that we did on March 17th, where we were talking to the Row Room Mastermind community. I was sharing my journey on how I've raised over $2 million from my community and how you can do the same. For example, the last deal, I was able to raise over $1 million in 7 days. So if that interests you, if raising capital may be something that's holding you back or something that you're fearful of to get started investing in assisted living, then be sure to check out this episode. And if you want to see my sweet mid-March mustache, say that 5 times fast, then watch this video on YouTube and check it out there. If you're thinking, hey, I want to get in the game, but I would like to invest with Charlie, Luke, and Alex and the Open Range Capital team, then go to our website, therowroom.com/invest, and you can get on our investor list. So without any further ado, let's get started with today's episode on how you can raise over $1 million. Cheers.
Welcome to the Row Room Assisted Living Podcast with your hosts, Charlie Cameron and Alex Schloe. This is your go-to show for cutting-edge insights from industry leaders in residential assisted living.
Whether you're ready to launch your own assisted living business or looking to invest in this fast-growing, high-impact sector, we are here to equip you with the tools, strategies, and confidence you need to succeed. Get ready to ride the silver tsunami and change the future of senior care. Now on to today's show. Awesome. What's up, everybody? Glad to see you all here tonight. Really excited for this call. I figured instead of presenting PowerPoint slides that may be a little bit boring, like Luke mentioned, he'll just interview me. I'll talk about my journey for raising capital and what that's looked like, as well as a lot of the fears that I had that I'm sure some of you all have as well in terms of raising capital. So it is a scary thing, and it's a huge honor to get to provide those opportunities to investors. But I'll just talk through some things and tips and tricks and stuff that I've learned along the way. As of this moment, I've raised $2,125,000, mostly through Physicians and Properties, but friends, family, etc. And in fact, yesterday I raised $50,000 and I didn't even know that it happened. So that was pretty cool. But we'll talk more about that in the journey and go from there. But before we get started, I just was hoping that you could put in the chat what your biggest fear is when it comes to raising capital. So just put that in the chat. That way we know where everyone's coming from, and we'll see if we can talk to some of those fears as we go through this presentation. And if you don't have any, even better. All right. Imposter syndrome, being turned down, mixing family and business, inexperience in raising funds, asking for money, with written arrangement or contracts are needed, biggest fear that you won't be able to raise money and the deal will fall through, debt to income ratio, structure, losing relationships. Man, guys, this is all good stuff. Yeah, these are all really valid concerns. I felt all of them myself, especially the imposter syndrome. And then the fear of what happens if we don't raise enough money and or losing relationships along the way. And it can feel a little bit uncomfortable and maybe a little bit slimy, if you will, to be willing to put yourself out there and raise capital. Okay. And we'll talk through some things that I think can help with that, and realize all this time that we spend thinking about what people think about us, they're really not, because all they're doing is thinking about themselves. And that's just something to think about as we're going forward. All these concerns, everything that's in the chat here, super valid, completely understandable. And hopefully through this, we'll be able to help alleviate some of those fears. So Luke, we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, man. Excited to get to interview you, and I'm sure I'll hear some parts of your story that I don't even know. But I just wanted to start with like the beginning. Take us back, and before you ever raised a dollar, what was your initial fear and doubts that you had with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Some folks that are in here maybe don't know the journey of Physicians and Properties and Open Range Capital. But I started Physicians and Properties, which is the podcast that I host before we started this mastermind. And it's been almost 2 years that I've been hosting that podcast. And I started that almost, I wouldn't say as a joke, but I kept getting a bunch of people who are reaching out to me who are physicians, and they're like, hey, how do I invest in real estate? So I told my wife, Steph, I was like, hey, I'm going to consider starting a podcast if Dr. Tom Burns, who's known as the Rich Doctor, is the first guest. So I reached out to Tom, And I didn't hear anything back for 3 months. I was like, awesome, I'm in the clear. I don't have to do this now. And then Tom emailed me back and was like, I would absolutely love to be the first guest. Sorry, I was backpacking in Panama, which is awesome to hit financial freedom and be able to do that. That was the start of Physicians and Properties. And then I've realized as the podcast was starting to grow and that community was starting to grow and the network was starting to grow, it was a really cool opportunity to utilize that platform to help raise capital for some awesome deals that we were doing and some deals that were brought to me that I vetted that I felt could be really good opportunities for my network. And just starting that podcast, oh my gosh, I had a ton of fear. A ton of fear of rejection, ton of fear of imposter syndrome, lots of fear of losing people's money. I didn't even start the podcast with the idea of raising capital. I still to this day don't really know what the true goal of Physicians and Properties is, but I just started it because I knew we needed to get that information out there and we needed to provide high quality information to doctors and healthcare workers because I didn't get any financial education in medical school. So started that. And I would love to go listen to the first few episodes because I'm sure they're terrible. But I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get the reps in and just keep going and just be committed to doing a podcast every week. And through that, I've learned that one, there's always more to learn. And there's always more to do. And I can always get better at the podcast. But also the amount of networking, relationships, and everything that comes from being willing to put yourself out there and share content and do podcasts, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable, can get you in rooms with people that you would never imagine and can get you in front of deals and opportunities that otherwise you would not have. And so I would encourage you, if you're sitting here and you're thinking like, I really want to raise capital, but I have no idea how to do that. The first thing you can do is just tell your story. Start sharing what you're doing. Start telling everybody what you're doing in terms of assisted living and real estate investing, because chances are these people don't even know what you're doing. And once they hear your passion, once they hear how you're trying to change senior care, they're going to be really interested in wanting to know more. And one thing I wanted to hit on before I forget is Brian Lubin, who's a good buddy of mine. He started the Action Academy, which is a great podcast. He brought up this email or a text message that he sends and recommends people sending if they're trying to raise capital. And basically, if you have a deal, you can send over some information about the deal, but then you should always end that with, do you know someone else who'd be interested in investing in this deal? Because it makes it feel less like you're asking them for money. And chances are they're going to be like, oh, yeah, absolutely. I know a bunch of people, or I want to invest in that deal. And then they connect you with more people, and then more and more of your network continues to grow, and you're able to continue to grow your investor database and go from there. So those are just some tips I learned early on, but really it was just getting over that fear of rejection, getting over that imposter syndrome, and being willing to share content, even though it probably wasn't great. That was really helpful. The other thing I'll say, by putting yourself out there, by doing a weekly podcast and so forth, people feel like they know you and people know and trust you before you get to the point of having to raise capital. And so it's pretty wild. I'll do random calls with folks and they're like, oh, how's your son Owen doing? How's Jack doing? Like, how was the camping trip? And I'm like, how do they know all this? And I realize it's because they're listening to me on a podcast every week, which is pretty wild. But it's really cool because then you've already stepped through that first hurdle of getting that trust, of building that relationship. And so then when you get to the point of needing to raise capital for deals, if they already know and trust you, it makes that a lot easier.
That's awesome, Alex. I also want to input that, like, you having started Physicians and Properties gave us, and your experience doing that and taking that action before you thought you were maybe ready, is also what gave us all confidence, you, me, and Charlie, to go forward and do the Row Room. Because we, starting with your story and starting with a good reason why, which is why we did it, but also just having those doubts and seeing you take that action gave us the courage to do it too. What finally made you take the first step? And you answered that, but was there a mindset shift or a specific moment that pushed you forward to actually taking that action?
Yeah, it's a great question, Luke. I think the initial first step was we needed to raise capital for our first deal that we raised capital on, the Tree Lynn deal. Excuse me. And so that was a lease to operator home, and we ended up raising $200,000 in capital in a private lending scenario for that. And that was largely from friends and family. We didn't reach out to my network at all for that, because I still was at the point of, I don't know if I want to use like Physicians and Properties to raise capital for these deals or not, or what if these doctors think I'm an idiot for this opportunity or whatever it may be. And so we just reached out to friends and family, and we raised that $200,000. That was a private lending scenario, 11% simple interest, and was a great opportunity for that. And we still cash flow almost $4,000 per month on that house. And we could talk more about that at the end. Or if folks have been on recent webinars that I've done, that's the deal deep dive that we typically do, because there's a lot of cool points to that deal. But we just had to do it. We hit a point where we were tapped out on all of our personal capital that we could keep putting in. And if we wanted to grow and scale, it was time to put on our big boy pants and start raising some money. And so we did that. And I remember it probably took a few weeks for us, me, Charlie, and Luke, to realize, hey, this is what we have to do. And are we sure we want to do it? Because as I mentioned from the very beginning, investing people's money or being stewards of someone's money that they've worked really hard for is a huge weight in a good way, but also a really good opportunity for them. And I realized from a mindset shift perspective that I had to be willing to put myself out there, because the more and more homes that we open, and same for the Row Room, the more and more homes that open, the more and more people who crush it in the Row Room and raise capital and build out more homes, that's more and more seniors who are getting the care that they need and the care that they deserve. So we really shouldn't stop. We really should be telling everybody that we possibly know about residential assisted living, so we can open more and more of these homes so more and more seniors can get the care that they need and they deserve.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll add that it was doing, like, preparing for that pitch. We practiced a lot. It wasn't just going out there. And of course, we had done it before with our own money. So that had given us the confidence, and we knew that there was a proof of concept. But after doing it, I personally realized we didn't, just by sharing the story, that's almost enough to do it. And if you believe in it and you just tell the story honestly and with the best intentions, that's going to come out in the way you pitch. But yeah, I would say that we practiced, and that set us up. And that was a scary first call, but after it was done, it was like, hey, like, we knew what we were doing. We'd done this before, and all we did was put it together and tell our story. Looking back, what do you wish we had known before we did that? And then maybe include, what do you wish you knew before you did your first raise outside of Open Range Capital?
For sure. I think for me, it was really just understanding that this is an opportunity. And we've had other deals that we've raised for that I've turned people away and just been like, hey, I don't think this is a good deal for you, and here's why. And I think that's really important, is realizing where your potential investors are. We'll never be ones to be like, hey, we're going to take your last 25,000 or your last 50,000, because I don't think that's us being good stewards of someone's capital. You have to understand where people are in their investing journey, and are they sophisticated enough to understand that there is risk to this. Of course, we try and mitigate those risks as much as possible. But I remember, like, thinking back on just the fact from the very beginning of, are we going to be able to raise this $200,000 that we need for this deal or not, and being terrified of that. And now I'm at the point now where I'm having to turn people away, or we're getting a bunch of wait lists. And I don't say that to brag, but I say that to really emphasize the point that you have to understand where your investors are, so you can realize, is this a good opportunity for them and where they're at in their specific situation. And then once you realize that you're really just offering an opportunity that they otherwise wouldn't have, that's what really changed it for me. Like I said, it was almost like I was afraid to raise money, which then led to potentially holding back on opportunities and deals and scaling, which would then lead to those negative outcomes that I mentioned, which would be less homes that get opened. And so I wish I just understand that from the beginning. And I wish I understood the importance of trust and storytelling and having that podcast, because I would have started Physicians and Properties years and years earlier. That was the best decision from a real estate investing perspective and a networking perspective that I ever made. And I'm so glad that I did that. So glad we started the Row Room podcast, because it's going to have the same effects.
That's awesome. Sorry, I was taking notes. It's so important to know where your investors are coming from. And we told them, we don't want, if you're on your last 50K, we don't want you to invest with us, because that's not the type of money that we want in this. And I think that was just an honest assessment. I would also add, know the macroeconomics. You can raise money whether it's a bull market and the economy is doing really well, or the economy is in a recession or doing poorly. You just have to talk through the pros and cons of whatever that is. If it is a bad economy, the need doesn't go away for residential assisted living. Deals actually get cheaper. Maybe your criteria changes and you're a little bit more on the conservative side, but just highlight that whenever you're talking about it. It's just the things that you're going through anyway that I think is important to raise. Shifting to scaling up, Alex, once you raised the first bit of capital, how did you build momentum on that? And what strategies helped you scale up and attract more investors?
Absolutely. I think the one thing I did right from the beginning was I tried to capture emails. I always heard my wife listened to Amy Porterfield a lot. I don't know if you guys are familiar with her, but she's awesome. And Amy talks all the time about investor list, or sorry, email list, email list, email list. And so as soon as I started the Physicians and Properties Facebook page, I tried to capture emails and realized, hey, I own that. Could YouTube shut down the podcast? Absolutely. Could the Instagram get shut down? Could the Facebook page? All that could be shut down, but I own that email list and I'll have that email list forever. So I would encourage you, if you're just getting started, think about the different ways that you can build out your email list. And I can show you what the email list or application looks like that I have, just so you can get the right information that you need to figure out, are folks accredited or not, without necessarily asking, except in mine, I just ask, are you accredited? But it'll give you some helpful information and things. So I'm grateful that I did that really early on and was able to build that email list out. The next thing is making sure that you're nurturing that email list, which is something I'm not the best at. I'm trying to be better about that, but trying to send out at least a monthly newsletter of, hey, this is what I'm working on. This is what we did. These were the episodes of the podcast and some things that I learned, et cetera. Those sort of things, just to keep that email list going and to keep you top of mind. And so then when you have the opportunity to raise capital, then you can share that deal. So that was really helpful for me. And then as we started to raise more deals and get more social proof, that was beneficial as well. And then I figured out over time, and I pulled up some emails that we can go through over time so you can see the progression and how I tend to frame things out. And you can see from the beginning to now how things have changed. But it's helpful to have that consistent communication with investors, both before they invest in the deal and, of course, when they invest in the deal. But one thing that I would say didn't work as well as expected, or something that I realized that I didn't think I was going to have to overcome, was I was very surprised that really early on, I got offered a bunch of deals to raise capital for. And in the beginning, it was like, holy cow, this is insane. You mean you're going to give me a percentage of this deal just to raise money? But then I looked at the deal and analyzed the deal. I'm like, I don't think this is great for the community. I don't think this is good for our investors for X, Y, and Z. And I don't know a whole lot about multifamily properties. So it was like a bunch of people were like, hey, can you help me raise capital for these multifamily deals? I'm like, I don't really know that. I don't really talk about that a whole lot on the podcast. It's probably not the best thing for me to raise money for. And then I had the first kind of initial raise that I did outside of Open Range Capital was for a hotel in the Smoky Mountains. My buddy Blake Daly, who's in the War Room Mastermind with us, he buys boutique hotels, and he reached out to me because he just needed to raise $150,000. That's all he had left because he had an investor back out. And I remember thinking, dude, there's no way. I have no idea how I'm going to raise $150,000. That was going on at the same time as our first Open Range Capital raise. And that was the first time I reached out to my network, and I sent one email, and we had way more money raised than we needed to, or way more commitments raised than we needed to. And we had to pare that back and just take the first two. And I remember thinking, holy crap, I just raised $150,000 off one email. And then we did 2 phone calls, each with the investors who were the first 2 to respond back. And they both committed. I'm like, this is nuts. I just got some equity in this sweet hotel in the Smoky Mountains just by doing that. So that was a light bulb switch of, this is crazy. If you have a really good deal, the money's out there. And I see Chloe's question there. Is it a good time to raise money now? Absolutely, as long as you have a good deal. And so the Tremont Lodge was first, the Smoky Mountain Hotel. Then we raised for a few homes. We did private lending scenarios on those. So that was a simple interest. And then walking through the progression, we raised some capital for 3 homes that we partnered with an operator in Wisconsin. So we raised capital in a fund. That was $650,000. And that was even more terrifying because you're going from 150 to 650 or 200,000 to 650. And so same thing, we reached out to our network, and I reached out to Physicians and Properties, and we had a bunch of people respond back immediately. The next day, I think it was, Luke, correct me if I'm wrong, the next day we were like, hey, we can do an impromptu webinar right now if folks are interested. Bunch of people hopped on, and then we were raised before the webinar completed, which was nuts. And we're like, this is crazy. And again, it was just a really good opportunity and a good deal. And that was the first deal that we had to turn people away after some folks were committed from the webinar. And I talked with them for a while and got to know their situation. I was like, hey, I don't think this is a good idea for you right now. They were looking for a quick flip of money. They weren't willing to, they didn't really want to hold for 3 to 5 years. And we're like, hey, this is going to be at least a 3 to 5 year hold time. And so it's just talking to your investors and figuring that out. From there, the latest raise I did was for a independent living deal. And this would have never, ever happened if it wasn't for the podcast. I interviewed a physician and her husband, Ryan Byrne and Francesca Byrne, and interviewed them on the podcast probably about a year ago. And I remember telling my wife, and I don't tell her this for everybody, I told my wife, if I was going to invest with someone from the podcast, I'd want it to be them. And so I just stayed in the world. Every time they posted a deal or posted what they were working on, I just reach out and be like, hey, that looks awesome. Like, what a sweet deal. Congratulations. And they do a lot of value add multifamily in high income areas like Houston, Charleston, Savannah. So not really things I was familiar with, but I was like, hey, I can just keep learning from them and keep being part of their world and keep connecting with them. And so Ryan sent me an email of this 485 independent living deal in the Villages of Florida. And I responded back immediately. I was like, hey, man, this is amazing. Do you need any help on this deal? And he immediately called me and he was like, hey, man, I was really hoping you'd say that. We need to raise $2 million for this. And I was like, holy cow, you got to be kidding me. And then he hit me with the minimum investment is $250K. And I was like, oh, man, everything I've raised for has been $25,000 or $50,000. So I told him, I was like, hey, man, I don't know how I feel about raising $250,000 minimum investment. That seems nuts. And he's like, trust me, man, you can do it. And it's going to be easier. And I was like, that's crazy. It's not true. So long story short, he was right. It was easier. In 7 days, I raised $1,025,000. He raised the other $975,000. So he raised the $2 million. And that was in less than a week. And that deal was exceptional. And that's why it raised so fast. And I can show you the email. But I say all that to say to show the journey and the progression of that first initial raise was terrifying. It was 200,000. We're like, oh my gosh, this is insane. To raising over $1 million really quickly and frankly, relatively easy. And I say easy in terms of, it only took a few emails and some webinars and a couple phone calls here and there. But I don't want you to forget the fact that I was doing a podcast every week for almost the last 2 years to build those relationships and nurturing that email list. So I don't want you to sit here and be like, oh my gosh, I can just go raise $1 million tomorrow. It's nothing. It does take a lot for those wheels to get turned in and start building that out. And then the last deal I raised for was a buddy in Action Academy reached out and he's like, hey, I need to raise some capital for a mobile home park. Here's the deal. It looks awesome. There's enormous tax benefits. Do you think anyone would be interested? And honestly, at that time, I was super busy and I was like, hey, man, I'm really busy. I know 3 or 4 people who might be interested. I'll send an intro email, but I don't know what will come of that. And I did. And ironically, when I was on the Dominican Republic trip with Action Academy, he came up to me. It was Aaron. And he's like, hey, man, congrats. You're a GP on this property. A couple people invested in the deal, and which was wild. And then another one just did yesterday, which is crazy. I've been very fortunate to be able to do that. But again, it all starts with building a network before you need the money, sharing what you're doing consistently, educating yourself on the opportunity that you're providing, and then starting with the people who already know and trust you. That's why we started with friends and family. So that got rambly there, but hopefully that's helpful to understand the journey of what I went down and the mindset shifts that happened along the way as those raises got bigger and those opportunities got bigger. Luke, what other questions do you have?
That was an awesome rundown, Alex. And we have some great questions in the chat that we'll get to at the end. But what approaches did you try that did not work as well as you expected? And what would you have done, like basically lessons learned on things that you wish you wouldn't have done or done differently?
I think things have been working well. We did have, I think it was for the St. John raise that we did, Luke. That was our latest home that we did. There was a few numbers that just didn't add up. And that was completely my fault, I think, in the one sheet, like one document. And I'll show you an example of one of them that we used. And so the email that we sent out said one thing, and then this one sheet that kind of was a summary of everything had a little bit different numbers. And I did have someone reach out to me like, hey, I really wanted to invest, but these numbers are off. And so they didn't. And that's fine. I totally get that. It probably would have been better if we just had a conversation and kind of explained, hey, this is why, or that was my mistake, or whatever it may be. And it was demographic data. It was basically, we said, in this town, there's this many people. And I think for the one sheet, we pulled from one source, and then for the email, we pulled from another, or something like that. And so it was just a little off. It wasn't anything that had to do with the numbers of the deal, other than the number of people who lived in the town. So I think it's just really important to make sure you're double checking, triple checking emails you're sending out, one sheets you're sending out, slides you're sending out, and those sorts of things, and make sure that all of those line up. Because some people are going to really scrutinize these and want to make sure everything lines up, all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, all across all your investment material, which makes complete sense, especially when they're willing to give you their money. I don't think really anything didn't work well. I've been doing the same process, and I can share what I do, but usually what I'll do is I will send like an initial email about the deal. And that usually will be with slides if we have slides built out, or with a one sheet if we have that built out. And I'll send that. And then I'll just send a few follow-up emails if needed that typically highlights like a key point about that deal. For example, that mobile home park, I sent one email that was just about the mobile home park deal with an offering memorandum, the slides, and a webinar that we recorded, or they recorded. And then a follow-up email that was like, hey, this is why this is an amazing opportunity from a tax perspective, because I know that the physicians that were getting that email were really concerned with depreciation and taxes. And that worked great. And so I think tailoring your messaging to who you're sending that out to and what the strengths of the deal are is really helpful as well. And then providing a couple different avenues and options for them, because some people are going to want to look at just one sheet of paper that has the summary and they're like, hey, that's good. I trust you. That's enough. Boom. Some people are going to want to dive into the slide deck and really get into that. Some people are going to watch the webinar. And so how different people think and how different people learn, you want to be able to offer those resources and those different platforms and go from there. And then the other thing, honestly, ChatGPT can be super helpful for this. And now we've trained our ChatGPT that we use for our business. So now we're able to really utilize that to help us market that and draft emails that are really engaging and really good, because we've been putting a bunch of them in there over time and analyzing a ton of deals and all those sorts of things. So it can be really helpful to use your ChatGPT and train it to think like you, to underwrite like you, to understand like you do, and to sound like you. And then you can use that as the framework for a good email that you can send when you're looking for capital.
That's awesome. I also, just something you said about how one investor looked at one thing that was a discrepancy with another piece of information that we had sent out. And you can definitely send out too much information, and it's best not to overcomplicate anything and just have consistency across the board. I think we've found that you cannot cover everything in a pitch. Let those questions come and then just be prepared to answer them, because you should know all those details if you're going to be pitching something, but you don't necessarily have to talk through everything, because that's just the more stuff you bring up, not to be shady, just the more stuff you bring up, that's just more, that's the attention span going lower and lower. That's some people getting distracted. Just another point.
Yeah, it's a great point, Luke. I think keeping it simple is important. So yeah, like one email that initially goes out that's a summary of the deal and the opportunity. And then usually it depends how short of a timeline the raise is, but usually I'll send one more a week after and one more a week after, if that's it. And then I never spam people. I'm not like, hey, I'm just going to keep slamming emails until this gets full. If I've sent 2 to 3 emails and it's not raised for, it's not raised for. And luckily we haven't run into that yet, but that's just something to keep in mind, is we don't want it to be spammy. If people aren't interested, they're not interested. But a key thing that is important is, as you're sharing what you're doing in your journey, you're answering a lot of those questions as you're sharing your journey, as you're telling your story. A lot of questions that people are going to have. What is residential assisted living? What is memory care? What's it mean when you say 16 beds, for example, versus 10? What's the average market rate? A lot of these things you're sharing as you're going along and sharing your journey. And so that's going to limit the number of questions you have. And so then when you get the opportunity to share this investment opportunity or do your webinar, they already understand the foundation of what you're doing. And so then it's just bringing them into your vision. And is that opportunity a good opportunity for them? So take some time to figure out what your avatar is, who your like avatar investor may be, and then you can tailor your messaging to them. For example, like I mentioned, doctors love tax benefits. So if you can talk to the tax benefits and depreciation of a deal, you're probably going to get some docs who want to invest in that. Okay. Someone who's really going after financial freedom, the FIRE community, they're going to be much more interested in hearing about the cash flow and that opportunity. And so maybe one deal is really heavy in cash flow and you reach out to those folks, the FIRE folks. Maybe one deal is really heavy in tax benefits and you reach out to the physicians. So just build out that investor list and get to know them and figure out what you think will work best for them. It's going to make it a lot easier for you to raise capital.
Yeah, that's really good. I believe it was Chloe who asked, and you already hit on this, but is now a good time to raise money? And that kind of leads into the question, if you were starting over today, because most of our raise obviously has happened between 2023 and now in 2025 of that money that we've raised. So that's a different time period than we're in right now. But if you were starting over today, knowing what you've already laid out some awesome steps that were very clear, but I think it's helpful to just in this frame, restate them. And what are the first steps that you would take to raise that capital in like today's world?
Yeah. Chloe, obviously you're a physician, so you have the benefit, and you're a geriatrician. So you have the benefit of being the subject matter expert when it comes to memory care. And when it comes to starting to build that Rolodex of potential investors who understand what assisted living is and who understand that there's an enormous need to improve healthcare outcomes, to improve the senior living situations that are out there, because doctors, we've all rotated in those nasty nasty facilities. The homes are better. But so I think if I were in your shoes, I wouldn't do anything any differently, except I would start getting uncomfortable, being comfortable with being uncomfortable, and start posting about what you're doing, start talking to physician colleagues, nurse colleagues, all these other colleagues about what you're doing. And you don't even have to, and don't even ask for money right now. Just be explaining, hey, we just bought this land. We're working with an engineer. We're getting ready to build a 16-bed memory care mansion. This is why it's so much better than some of these big box facilities. And we're really excited about it. And just leave it at that and just keep sharing what you're doing. That's going to get them interested. And try and get their email. In that email that I mentioned from the very beginning of, do you know anyone else who might be interested in this deal? You can even do that in a text message. One of my friends was telling me that when he first started raising capital, he went through his phone and every day he would text 5 people and just be like, hey man, it's been awesome. I hope things have been going well since high school. Are you still playing football? Whatever, something personal. And then, hey, I don't know if you know this, but I'm working on building this memory care mansion in Mississippi. And here's what we're doing. If you know anyone else who may be interested in this, do you mind sending them my way? Because then it's completely non-threatening. You're not asking for money. You're just connecting with an old pal, and you never know what's going to happen. Maybe they are now an executive at wherever, and they have a bunch of cash that they want to invest, and they just didn't know that opportunity even existed. So collect the email, share what you're doing. And then once you get closer to doing the raise, that's when you're going to start nurturing that list. You figure out, hey, how much do I need to raise? What are some really good terms that I can offer? Someone asked a question about structure. There's a lot of different ways that you can structure deals. We've done some private lending deals where we're like, hey, we're going to give you 10, 11% interest annualized on these deals for 5 years, and we're going to refinance. We're going to pay off your initial investment. Excuse me. And then we own the deal free and clear. Excuse me. That's a great way to do it.
Hey there, sorry to interrupt this episode, but I've got a question for you. Do you want to share in the wealth and incredible returns from the highest demand asset class in real estate without the hassle of doing it all yourself, or at least not yet? Residential assisted living is booming, and it's only gaining momentum. That's why we created an investment fund at Open Range Capital, so you can benefit without the heavy lifting. With the silver tsunami upon us, demand for assisted living is far outpacing supply, making this the can't miss opportunity for the next few decades. We provide access to fully vetted investment opportunities that are primed for success and ready to deliver strong passive returns. Don't wait, ride the wave with us. Visit theralroom.com/invest to partner with us on future investment opportunities. Again, that's theralroom.com/invest. We look forward to connecting with you. Now back to the episode.
Private lending is awesome, but you have to think, okay, who probably is okay with private lending and not equity? And that is probably someone who's got a lot of money in a savings account or a lot of money in an IRA, and they don't know, hey, I can do a self-directed IRA and I can get a 10 to 11% guaranteed interest return on my money backed by real estate. That's a way better opportunity than a 3% interest rate high yield savings account. or who knows what's going to happen in the stock market tomorrow. I feel like the stock market right now is like a meme coin in itself. It's just up, down, up, down. And so people are looking for that stability. And so that avatar is probably someone who's older, has a lot of money in savings. They have an IRA or a 401k that they don't know they can self-direct, and they self-direct into your deal, and they're really happy they're getting 10 to 11%. Then you could do a JV. Maybe the JV looks like Aaron and Lewis partner on a deal. Lewis brings the capital, Aaron builds the home and does the operations. So then that's taken care of. So that's not even really raising capital. It's just finding the right partner. Then you can consider doing a JV where the capital is split up for a percentage of equity, and maybe you're bringing in multiple folks. Everyone needs to have, and I'm not an attorney, I'm not an SEC attorney, and I'm not an accountant. So I have to put that disclaimer out there, but everyone needs to have a role, but maybe that's how you split it up as well. Hey, everyone, let's have 4 people bring 50,000. There's our down payment. We'll all split up our roles and responsibilities and go from there. And then of course you can do more of a syndication or a larger raise. That's always an option as well. And that's just pulling capital together. Then you get into the 506B and 506C discussion of, okay, do they have to be accredited investors or not? Can you bring in unaccredited investors? The way I remember that is 506B is for both. So you can bring in some unaccredited investors, you can bring in accredited investors. 506C is going to be just accredited. And so there's stipulations for that as well. 506C for only accredited investors, you can post that everywhere. You can post that deal on your Instagram, you can post it on Facebook, you can post it anywhere, and that's fine. 506B, you have to have a previous relationship with the potential investor. So that's where the email list is really helpful. That's where documenting, if you have a Calendly or something and you're hopping on calls with potential investors, that's automatically saving, hey, you called them on this day. So if the IRS were to come and say, hey, show us that you have proof of relationship with this investor who's unaccredited, then you can do that and you can show that proof of relationship. That would be more of your syndication approach. But there's a lot of different ways to structure it. There's a lot of different ways to do it. It just depends on the deal. It depends on how much money you need to raise. And it depends on how you think you can most effectively raise that capital.
That's awesome. We're getting close to the time when we need to open it up for Q&A, but just, Alex, what's one mindset shift or piece of advice that you would want to leave with everyone today?
I would say the piece of advice today is just take some sort of action, even if that's just reaching out to one person tomorrow and just telling them what you're doing and that you may have a potential investment opportunity in the future. And so try that same line of, do you know anyone who may be interested in investing in a deal like this, and see what happens. And then reach out to the next day, reach out to more and just see what happens. And you can quickly build a Rolodex from that perspective. Luke, I'm okay going a couple minutes over if everyone else is. I just want to show you real quick, and I'm going to figure out how to put these into school, but I just want to show you a few emails and stuff that we've sent out just so you can get an idea and a flavor for how we have done it. And again, I'm going to try and save these. Just give me 5 minutes to show these and we'll hit some questions if that's okay.
Yeah, while you're working, Alex, I certainly have a imposter syndrome or maybe a dislike with social media or putting myself out there. Thankfully, I'm partnered with Alex and Charlie, which is another huge tip I would advise, partnering with somebody who meets where your weaknesses are. But like it or not, you guys are in the RAL room and this is part of your story. And I would just encourage you to build that muscle of sharing your story. And when like an old friend reaches out to you, or if anybody's asking you, like, what do you do or how are you doing? Share with them, oh, I invest in residential assisted living. Either I'm an owner, I'm starting one, I'm buying one. That's part of your story. And if you just flex that muscle of just sharing, that's going to pique people's interest because it's different. It's something that brings it. In times of uncertainty, I would almost say that a recession can bring about more anxiousness, but also people are going to be seeking ways to make money or have a stable place for their money. So I would just encourage you to flex that storytelling muscle and be willing to put yourself out there. It's part of your story, so don't be afraid to share it.
Yeah, that's great, Luke. It's all storytelling. And another thing I think that would be helpful from an action perspective would be figuring out your elevator pitch. What's your like 10 to 20 second elevator pitch of who you are, what you're doing, why should someone potentially invest in you? That's going to be huge. That's going to be something that you can work on now that will be beneficial. But for example, a guy next to me at the gym, his name's Jim. at the gym. And he's next to me every day, and we just talk. And next thing we know, like, we start talking about real estate. Turns out he's got some properties in Breckenridge, and next thing, he's interested in investing in assisted living. And so you just never know what's going to come out of each conversation. And it can feel uncomfortable initially, but trust me, it's going to be worth it. And again, you're the only one who's thinking about how uncomfortable it is. The other person's just thinking about themselves. Just get out there and be willing to share. I could not find the initial email that Luke and I and Charlie sent out, but this was, I think, the second or third deal that we raised capital for. And this is similar to an email that we send out initially. And so basically what we do is we just put the investment highlights right up front. Okay, here we're looking to raise 50,000, minimum investment's 25, open to both accredited and non-accredited. This is a passive lending scenario. And this one we're offering 10% simple interest. And we put right here, okay, if you invest $50,000, you're going to get mailbox money of $416.67. Here's the hold time. Here's what that can look like in interest plus the initial investment return. And then we put some property details in here as well. Kind of one-liner about ourselves. And then there's always limited availability. You got to create that sense of urgency. And for this, we're raising 50,000. So it literally is one investor. And so we are maybe two. And so that sense of urgency was true and helpful. And then we also usually will put some upcoming opportunities. If we have some other opportunities that we're working on, at that time, we were working on a house in South Carolina that fell through. But this is just really simple. And feel free to steal this. I'm going to, again, put these in the school community once this recording comes out. And then this was a one sheet we did for this deal. We're not very graphic design savvy, but it's simple. It's basically everything that you need to know on one sheet, and answer some questions that people have, and then contact information. So I'll put these as well. We have a few other ones in the chat, but it can be as simple as that. This was the very first deal we did. We sent 2 emails. I couldn't find the first one. This was like the last call one after we did the webinar. And again, just a pretty simple email. Missed the webinar, watch it here. Here's the highlights of the deal. We ended up just raising 200,000 intentionally. And then a couple pictures, go from there. So that's that. This was the latest one. This was that mobile home park deal that I inadvertently raised for. What I did honestly in this is I took their operating memorandum and their slides, and I asked them if I could do this. And I put it in ChatGPT, and I said, please analyze this deal, tell me all the highlights, and help draft an email that hits all the important highlights of this that I can send out to investors. And I did some tweaking, but it came up with a lot of good information, which is insane that it can like analyze this and say, Tim's got 5 years with 473 units. So use the tools, use ChatGPT to help you get a guide. But for example, this is set up similarly as well to that email. And then they sent the offering memorandum, and then the webinar they could get here in the investor portal. So just keeping it simple. And then, so I sent that one email. This was the second email that I sent that was about the tax benefits, because like I said, I knew that the docs were going to be interested in tax benefits. So here, substantial tax benefits through depreciation. And then here it is, like for 89 cents depreciation for every dollar invested. So like every doc is, hey, that sounds amazing. And so anyways, that was for that. I'm hurrying. This was the independent living deal that we raised for. This was the $1,025,000 that I raised, and how that email was set up. This one is a little bit more complicated of a deal because it's a new development and there's a lot more to it that we could talk about. But same, hey, here's your potential returns. Here's a little bit about the project. Here's the webinar. This is right from the operating memorandum. And why this filled so fast is the IRR is 53%. This is really conservative. And the equity multiple is 3.6x, which is insane. If you invested $100K, it's going to be $360K, which is insane. And then that sense of urgency and next steps, deal deck, webinar link, Dropbox link that had a bunch of information. And then now we're getting fancier. So you can see that evolution over time in terms of the emails and just some things to think about and go from there. Okay. And then this was our very first one sheet that we sent out. This is the first deal that we raised for. And so we sent this with our emails. I couldn't find the initial email, but this is what that sheet looked like as well, just to give you another example. Like I said, I'll try and get all these into resources on School so you can take a look at. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions now, of course, or in the future of what can be helpful for people to raise capital. We want to give you the tools to succeed, and a lot of it is just getting out there.
That's awesome, Alex. I hope that demystifies for everyone some of the mystique around raising money, you see how simple it is. It's telling your story. It's putting out simple information on what the deal is going to produce, which if you're going to do a deal, of course, you have to produce that information and you have to know it by heart. But then once you've done that and you've done the due diligence, you have the deal. From there, it's just sharing that story, and people are going to want to do it, whether it's a recession or not. People have money, whether it's a recession or not. And people want to invest in real estate. And if they're watching the trends, they want to invest in senior care. So with that, we'll hit some of these questions in the chat. Thanks for everyone's vulnerability on just talking, on sharing some of your, what scares you about raising money. Completely normal. And let's see, where's our first question? How long between raising the money to investing in the project? That's going to depend, Nick. And you can, when you go into contract on a home, like we were doing, we were just keeping the investors appraised of, hey, this is the timeline. So that was part of the limited time. We were prepared to invest in those deals with our own money. So at the end of the day, if we didn't have investor money coming in, of course, that would have been ideal. And we would have gotten to share in those proceeds, that 11% guaranteed return that we're giving those investors. But it was limited time and it was scarce. So we just shared with them that timeline. Hey, we're closing in July, so we need your money before then. And I think, Alex, on average, we maybe on that first one, we had it sitting in the bank 2 weeks before we needed to actually transfer those funds. And I hope that, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, no, you're right. When we told them what the closing date was going to be and that the next month was going to start their returns, their distributions. And so just figuring out that timeline. But you can always get soft commits whenever you want. If you have an idea on, hey, I need to raise X amount of money for this memory care mansion, you can always get soft commits whenever you'd like. And that's where that investor list can be helpful. While we're talking, I'll pull that up. I forgot, I said that I would share that form so you guys could see it. But that's where it can be helpful to gauge out, okay, what do people want to invest in? How much capital do they potentially have to invest? And you can even put like, when, in what time frame are you looking to invest? That can be helpful as well. But yeah, that's a great question, Nick. So it really just depends on the deal, but you can get as much information and things lined up as fast as you can. And that kind of leads to Amy's next question. So you find the deal first and then raise capital. Yes and no. So you're keeping your investor list warm by sending the email, sending the communication out there and letting them know what you're working on. But yes, you have to find the deal first so you know how much capital you need to potentially raise. That's going to impact, depending on if it's a $1 million deal or a $2 million deal, how much you have to raise is going to be dependent on that. But you want to make sure you have that ability and you have those investors who are ready to invest. So then once you find that deal, you can do that. You can also adjust your due diligence period accordingly as well to give you a little bit more time to raise that capital. If you're buying a house, like you're buying your personal residence, yeah, absolutely, you'd want to have your funds in line. But from an investment perspective, totally fine to find the deal, figure out what you need to raise, and then get after it. Usually you're raising this money in a couple weeks. It's not like this is a really long process. It's like you send out that email, you get as much interest as you can from that initial email. You hop on some phone calls, you do a webinar, and you're raised within a couple weeks. So it's not too long of a process. You can do it in due diligence.
But keep in mind, you have two lending partners. You have the bank and you have your investors. So
yep.
you will have needed to just like you said, you will have needed to line that up with the bank. So let's say they're only going to give you 60% for the deal for whatever reason. Okay, now you need to raise 40%. Or let's say you want to put 10% of your own money in, then you only need to raise 30%. So you do know that from the bank going in. Heather asked, do you wait until you get the minimum needed to collect and put it into an account, or as people decide? And do you have a separate account for each deal? Yes. Yeah, you just put it into a bank account. So you have a holding account that's the way we did it. We established the LLC that's going to be the holding company for that house. And then with that LLC comes a bank account. So as we pooled money, we would just transfer that money to that bank account as people decided. And we had a set date that we told the investors, hey, it's going to be in, let's say, September when you start receiving that interest paycheck that we're going to start paying you. So they understand when they give it to you, they know when they're going to be getting their first paycheck. And if things change, you just have to keep them aware of it. That's just part of being a money raiser and being a custodian of somebody else's money. They deserve the attention and the updates to what's going on. You do have to be on top of that. And until you can hire somebody who's a money raiser and the account person, you have to do that yourself.
Yeah, Heather, also to piggyback that, recommendations on what company to use. We use Mercury Bank. We love Mercury. Relay is another one I've heard folks use that's really good. We love it for a few reasons. It's really easy to see your whole, like all your accounts in one. It's hard to explain that, but you're going to ultimately have like your holding account, probably like your holding LLC that's then going to own your home. And then the more and more homes you have, you're going to have more and more accounts under that. And if you're owning the real estate and the operations, you're probably going to have an operations account and a real estate account. So you're going to get bank account overload. Mercury does a really good job at making it where you can see all those accounts. You can tie all those accounts together. And then you can do what's called profit first, which we hit on, which we don't have a lot of time to get into the nuts and bolts here. But there was a really good question in the community about profit first. And essentially, you can set the percentages of like sub accounts within that, if that makes sense. So you would be able to say, of all the income coming in, I want 60% to go to profit to pay myself first, profit first. And then, 20% to whatever taxes, operations, et cetera. You can divvy that out. And so it's really cool to be able to do that through Mercury. And it's really simple to do that through Mercury. So we love that. And they're really fast at getting accounts started. It's free to wire. It's free to ACH. It's just a really good platform. So we really like Mercury Bank.
Chloe, you commented confidence builder practice seems to be big. I just want to comment on that. Yes. So if you're not a natural born storyteller like Alex, you're going to need to practice. I will say that real estate investing and just getting into the investor mindset made me a better storyteller, because when you start thinking about your story, you start sharing that. Now your mind starts naturally looking for things that are going to lend to make the story better. And like I heard an Aesop's fable the other day of the lion and the fox, and the fox has 9 to 12 babies per year, and it was given this lion shit because a lion only has one baby. And as it was teasing the lion just responds calmly, "Yes, you have 9 to 12 babies, but my one baby is a lion." And that I took that, and I'm going to totally use that in how and the reason why we chose residential assisted living to invest, because that's something that lends very easily to the story of why we're doing what we're doing. And I'm going to keep going because I don't want to get behind here. Lewis asked, what does your email collection process look like?
Yeah, let me share my screen real quick, and I'll show you what I do. Also shameless plug, tomorrow we're going to tell that same fable for the first slide for the webinar that we're doing. It's a good one. The Rows are lions. So this is one thing I wish I started doing a lot earlier on. So I did capture emails, but I did not build out this investor list for a long time, literally probably like the last 3 months. But this is what it looks like. Email, first name, last name, phone number. Are you accredited? Yes or no? Are you interested in being a private lender? How much capital are you looking to passively invest? And put that 500,000 plus out there. I have a few folks who put that, and I put my pants a little bit, but there's people that are interested in investing that much. What are your current investment goals? This is a good way to figure out, okay, when are they interested in investing? And then what's the main thing that they're looking for? Are they looking for financial freedom? Are they looking for tax benefits, et cetera? How do they hear about it? This is just for me to look at. What's their experience? What's their real estate experience, which can be helpful? And then what asset class do they want to invest in? That's what I have. It's pretty simple. It gives me enough information that if we're raising money for residential assisted living, I'll go into the list and I'll find everyone who wants to do that, and I'll send an email out to them. Or if it's short-term rentals, whatever that may be, boutique hotels, et cetera. And then that gets put on a Google Sheet. And I probably shouldn't show you this because it's got people's personal information in it, but that all gets put onto a Google Sheet. And then you can really quickly look at it and filter it. But yeah, something that I would add here maybe would be adding another one that says, like, how quickly are you looking to invest? And that'll give you an idea on how quickly folks have access to the capital that they're looking to raise. These all go on a Google Sheet, and then we use Go High Level, which has been very difficult and not very favorable to us for emails. So we're still trying to figure out that piece. The deliverability has been poor. What I would recommend doing, and what I did when I first started, was using MailerLite. I think you can get up to 1,000 emails stored in MailerLite for free. And it's really simple to build those out. and they have a really easy tool to build out the emails, and the deliverability was really good. I would take a look at MailerLite. That worked well. And then the emails, just have those, capture those and put those in a Google Sheet. However you can do that, or have them fill out a full form like this, and then you can upload that Excel sheet or that Google Sheet into MailerLite and pull the email list that way, and then build your emails out and send it through MailerLite.
Chloe asked, have you had any failures? And this will probably be our last one, guys, because we're right on the last minute here. Have you had any failures? And if so, how do you handle that? So failed deals. I would say we haven't had any failed deals yet. Inevitably, that's probably going to happen one of these days. We like to think that we set all the conditions and we mitigate the risk the best we can. I would say our worst performing deal, Alex, is one that just us, you, me, and Charlie invested in. We've had to deal with that one ourselves.
Yeah.
So it can happen. You can do all the right things, and guess what? You get a return on your money in investing because there's risk. Always remind your investors, like, hey, this is not a guarantee of return. So there's a risk here. And if you're not comfortable with having somebody else's money in your custody, forget all the tactics about how to actually get someone to invest with you. If you're not comfortable with raising 30% of a deal because the bank will give you 70, then maybe what are you comfortable with? Are you comfortable with only raising 15% of that deal? Okay, then put 15% of that down yourself and save up the money and have the discipline to do that so that you can do that because that's what you're comfortable with. And then raise that 15% because you can handle that type of ebb and flow that happens with investing. What do you have to add there, Alex?
Yeah, I love that. I think it all can come back down to velocity of money. And so that's the beauty of raising capital is, hey, if you only have, say you have $300,000 in the bank and you're concerned for raising capital, it's exactly like Luke said. If the down payment's $300,000, you don't want to completely wipe yourself out, then maybe you raise half of that at $150,000. You get your feet wet with the raising capital perspective. Then you have another $150,000 that you can keep in reserves if you want to, or use to invest in more deals. And it's really, raising capital is really the thing that's going to put your foot on the gas and help you scale. But it also needs to be obviously safe and good opportunities for folks as well, and mitigate it as best you can. I personally am invested in a deal. This is not one I raised for. That's a mobile home park, and it's in South Carolina, Spartanburg, and it has not gone as planned. But that was largely because of the hurricane that hit Western North Carolina and South Carolina. They just didn't have enough reserves to cover for the damage that was done. So we did take a hit. There's no capital call, but they didn't raise enough money in reserves. So now they're having to pause distributions for a couple months, build up that reserve account, and then restart. So it hits a little bit. Is my money still safe? Yeah. But am I going to get as good of a return? No. But those things do happen. And they came right out and they told us as soon as it happened. And so I think it's just being open and honest and willing to tell folks if things don't go as planned. And also don't put yourself in a position where you could fail if you can mitigate that otherwise.
And actually, I'm reminded of Greenville, Alex. We did raise, this is maybe a failure. We did raise, 150, 200K for a Greenville, South Carolina deal that we ended up not buying the deal because, yes, we could have pressed forward, but it didn't meet what our risk criteria had allowed. And we decided as the investors to not proceed with the deal. And what did we do? We just updated our investors with that information and promptly sent back their money to them. I think maybe one of them decided to reinvest with the next deal that we had done, but the rest of them, they said, hey, we're not going to reinvest into the next deal that you're going to do. And that's okay. There's more money out there. We were honest brokers about it, and it's no harm, no foul. I have no problem reaching back out to them again for another opportunity that comes because they were clearly interested the first time, and we're just going to keep doing this. Lewis, yes, Mercury does allow for the opening of LLC accounts. We highly recommend Mercury Bank. Yep, as people are saying, happy St. Patrick's Day. Hope this was a valuable call. Worth the cost of admission right there, hearing from Alex and his story. I hope you guys walk away with some clarity on how you can do the same. And that's it, guys.
Yeah, I hope it was helpful. Feel free to follow up with any questions you have in the school community, and we'll get after those. And once we get this recording put out, I'll attach all the resources, as many of the emails as it'll let me and so forth too, so you guys can pick through that and see what's helpful.
All right, guys. Have a great night. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
See y'all.
Thank you for tuning in to the Raw Room Assisted Living Podcast. We hope you found today's episode insightful. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave us a raving 5-star review. And a quick review helps more listeners find the show and more seniors get the exceptional care they deserve.
And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And just so you know, we have prepared some free resources for you to help you succeed in residential assisted living in addition to this podcast. Head over to theralroom.com, that is the-RAL room.com, to download our free 10-step guide to launch your first or next residential assisted living home, or our 10 reasons to passively invest in residential assisted living ebooks.
And if you're ready to take the next step and make real moves in the RAL industry, join us in the RAL Room Mastermind. It is an exclusive community where we deep dive into everything you need to launch and grow your own residential assisted living business. You'll get access to recorded courses, live calls with industry experts, a RAL calculator, resources and tools, like-minded entrepreneurs, funding opportunities, and an expert networking community to help you along your journey.
Be sure to join us next time on the RAL Room Podcast as we continue to explore the world of residential assisted living with more great guests. See you then.